nefarious waiting to happen, and on top of their own sort of instinctive moral code is this authoritarian BS they were taught. That includes cops, and it includes soldiers, and it includes even tax collectors. And they have to, it takes some effort to say, they're people too. Just barely, but they're people too. And so if the lie goes away, there's nothing in the way of peaceful coexistence of all these people. So there's a bunch of, conservatives who were just raised that way, and I was raised that way, so that was me for a long time. They're nice and they're generous and they're kind and they're, compassionate and considerate and all those things, and they believe in authoritarian garbage, which kind of ruins it. But if the lie goes away, they're perfectly decent people. And at the same time, there are some people who understand the philosophy of voluntarism, and they're just kind of jerks. And I say, well, in the long run, the jerk is probably still going to be a jerk. But a lot of those people who are otherwise good statists, and they're advocating bad stuff because of this lie they believe, they're going to be good voluntarists. Like, the transition's going to be not that difficult for them. And so at the end of the day, whether somebody's a jerk or not matters a lot too. Even though today, the jerks who aren't advocating that I be robbed to fund a war, I appreciate them not advocating that.
I totally understand that, and I think really where that comes into is, I think that when you embark on this realization and you understand, especially one of the things about being an anarchist to me is that you have faith and trust in people. You have faith and trust in your community. Mm-hmm. And I think that really comes into play when you start to really adopt that mindset, that you understand that you have to have this faith. You have to open up and understand that essentially all we really have is ourselves and each other as a community to rely upon. And it seems like some people on our side of the field are still almost adopting a every man for themselves mindset still, especially when it comes to even prepping and things like that.
And I feel like that's understandable, because if you sort of liken the abuse of the state on its victims, on the citizenry, to a spouse abusing their spouse and the victim, he likes to call the symptoms of citizens abused by their government battered citizen syndrome, because the result of that is that just because you wake up to what that is, now you're an anarchist, all your fight, flight, freeze senses that are now aware of what you've been under, and maybe you've dealt directly with it, you faced off with the feds and cops directly, they've assaulted you, so you've got all this sort of built-in memory of trauma, and it's telling you okay, there's this whole thing that can do this to me, and then there's a bunch of people out here who will absolutely let that happen, and they will not even come to help, and they'll probably even assume I'm the bad guy if I'm reported on the news as accused of whatever.
Wake up.
So your whole system goes, people just scary people scary right now. I want to run. It's best to just go and go nature. Hey, animals won't do that to me, at least. I'm just gonna go run away in the woods. And I get that, because I think everyone goes through the I want to hermit out phase, but it's not actually the answer for most people. I think there's a very few humans on the planet that their soul can actually handle being a hermit, and it might be meant for them, but I actually don't think we're really designed that way. I think that it's a result of a trauma response, and we go, I think that I'm supposed to disconnect from everyone, because I have only experienced nothing but unhealthy connections. So all I have are memories of unhealthy connections. My connector's worn out, so I have no desire to try anymore. I want to run away. And that's why people want to run. And it's there's a time and place to run and heal. And then you come back and you realize, I don't hate people. I love them. I was really mad at how they were acting and treating me. And so I couldn't connect with them anymore because I was worn out. Well, when you're worn out by feeling like there's a whole mechanism and system that's targeting you and a bunch of your friends and your victims of that, it's so, I think, psychologically overwhelming that the response is get the fuck out of here. Yeah. The mountains are calling my name. And I love the mountains, and the urge is so strong to run that I fight that. I fight it consciously because I do love my friends, and I can see how many people that wake up suddenly need human connection, and I'm somebody that can be another person on the other end of that human connection. I can be there for them when they're floundering and scared and does anyone else out there see what I see? Am I the only one? Do I have to run from everyone? I can be no, you don't. I also see you, brother. I am right here. We can reinforce each other. So.
Even that is largely solved by understanding the lie of authority. Because if you see all these people cheering for the warmongering and the rah-rah-rah for whichever side of political idiocy, it's easy to think, well, you're all cheerleaders for evil. Like, I want a world without you guys. Instead of recognizing they're all doing that because they were brainwashed into thinking authority's the thing, and that it's okay to, aggression's okay if you do it by way of these stupid pseudo-religious rituals and call it legislation and stuff. And so being able to recognize that humanity is mostly people trying to do, it isn't everybody, but people trying to do the right thing, and then they were taught a bunch of crap.
Exactly.
And realizing that's all that has to go. They don't have to go, just the crap they were taught.
It is.
That is so encouraging when you recognize the problem isn't humanity. It's this particular lie that's been drilled into the heads of like everybody you'll ever meet. And when that goes, that fixes so much of society's problems.
What are some of your influence that would surprise people, that you think would surprise people? You mentioned Ayn Rand. That one was, pretty. I think every libertarian would say they should be familiar with Ayn Rand's work.
I think
Rose Wilder Lane.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know her name, sadly.
She's the daughter of Laura Ingalls Wilder, which is the author of the Little House on the Prairie series.
And she wrote Discovery of Freedom, which is an awesome book. I think when you talk about people being surprised, people are surprised when I point out or I quote from people who are obviously statists and advocated stupid stuff, but they saw a piece of truth and they recognized it. And that's like most of the world. Like, they still believe dumb stuff because they haven't looked at it yet.
I mean, Hitler said some true stuff. But, just Hitler.
Just to jump to that. Because
it's Hitler.
The whole path of sort of human awakening, and he did, like, he pointed out a bunch of unfair things that were being done to the German people, and then turned that around and made a different set of unfair things that were happening to the German people, and lots of other people too.
So like Karl Marx, for example?
Yeah, a different version of evil.
Karl Marx is almost too slimy to even sympathize with him, because I think he knew what he was doing. But even a bunch of communists, where I think your conclusion is just way off and way wrong and would lead to an absolute catastrophe, but you're right to complain about these particular things, and you're right to recognize this isn't okay when government gives this corporation power to, like, force us to go to them and do all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so whenever anybody recognizes the injustice of certain authoritarianism, I'm like, good, I'm glad you recognize it. Do you get the root of the problem, or are you just nitpicking about that and then cheering for some other form of authoritarianism, which most people do? But I think the sort of path of human awakening, it often is this awkward, stumbling, staggering mess where they notice, and it was for me. I don't even like to admit how long it took me to give up that last little bit of statism from when I totally recognized, like, the most obvious principles. And I made a video about this long ago, a thing called, a little pamphlet called The God Called Government that I wrote when I was still a statist. And I got so much right. And then I was saying, this is why we need a government that just does this. And I looked back at it and I was like, how did I think those two match?
You found that and I was like, oh my God, you actually still have
That's introspection.
Like,
that's contrition.
And I made a video reading it before telling people who wrote it. And then giving a critique of what the guy got wrong, and then pointing out the guy was me the whole time.
That's so beautiful. I love it.
But I think a lot of people do that, is they recognize, I don't like this, and it's why the Candles in the Dark thing that we do, a seminar that's designed to help voluntarists talk to the rest of the world in a way that doesn't make them immediately defensive and offended and angry and argumentative, is to find the part of them that already resents certain kinds of authoritarianism. Instead of starting with your own objections to whatever you're against, find one that they're against. Like, what's something that you think it's wrong that you're forced to pay for that by way of taxes? Like, the left may say, warmongering. Yeah, I agree. You shouldn't be for. And so there's a starting point, and from there you have to find the principle underneath. Because what most people, because of what they haven't thought about, most people's position is basically, authority shouldn't make me do things I don't want to. They should just make other people do things that I want them to. And they've never looked at the principle. And so Candles in the Dark, we just walk them through, like, and so we'll be on their side when it's like, should you be forced to fund things you're against? Let's say I want it for, like, a bridge or something, but you don't. You think it's okay for government to force you. And if they say no, I agree. And I say, even if I want it, I don't think government should force you to fund that.
Exactly.
Now, let's say there's something that you want and I don't. Are you okay with government forcing me to? And then they suddenly go, huh. It's like, how
They
have so many
just
people
said-
never thought about that before?
They just said they don't want it done to them.
Yeah, and you agreed. And you
you're
said,
like,
I don't want it done to you either.
And then you're like, I don't want it done to you either. And then you're like, but what if I want this thing done? And then you actually ask them, what's something you think government should do? And they're like, well, I'm pro this. Okay, I don't want that.
So
I don't want to
be
fund
forced
it.
to fund
What
that.
do you?
Exactly.
And then you phrase it like this: what do you want to have happen to me if I break that law and don't follow it?
Yeah, and be
Because they
specific
don't
and literal.
want
Like, do you want me
to
to put
give
in
my
a
life to
cage? Do you want me?
Because I think what that does is it forces people to be aware of themselves.
Yeah.
Especially, when it seems that today in American culture, especially ones who partake in the consensual reality, they are not aware of themselves.
Yeah.
There's this obvious disconnect, and just asking simple questions like that can really turn around people's perspectives.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting how you guys actually implemented that psychological approach to the movie as well. And one thing I wanted to talk about that you showcased really good is how they keep us in a state of mesmerized terror.
Mm-hmm.
They constantly keep us in this state of mesmerized terror. And I really liked how you brought that aspect into the movie with the when he wanted to be free, right? He was like, of course, you won't be safe from the other plantation owners, and you could possibly get scooped up by the other plantation owners, but you can be free. If
We'll
you
make
want.
sure you get scooped up. By
Right.
So,
But we don't say that.
well, I find it really interesting how you almost perfectly sat in all of these homages to a lot of the issues that we're doing. Like, how much thought went into that? I mean, how much thought and planning went into setting these at these precise times?
It was
3 years worth.
Yeah.
I mean, if it seems like 3 years worth, it was. I mean, these guys were balls to the wall for 3 years. Like,
Yeah,
I
immediately
mean,
writing the script.
I was mostly worried about them dying from stress. That was my main concern most of the way through that.
But that particular setting of that allegory gives an opportunity to talk about so many different things.
Absolutely.
And so for us, the challenge wasn't how are we going to make a whole movie. It was because I wrote the rough draft of the first version of the script, and it would have been 3 hours long. And Andrew's like, "That's awesome. I'll make it way shorter."
He's like, now
So
remember
then we're-
Americans' attention spans.
That's right. So then we're whittling it down and chopping it down, and a bunch of things had to go because they didn't fit. And then I'm like I talked about at the screening, I wrote the novel version to put back all the things that don't fit in a movie because the average novel will be like a 10-hour movie. So the movie is exactly what I want the movie to be, and then the novel puts in a bunch of digging deeper and stuff. But so you can see all the things there that we couldn't cram any more into this 110-minute movie. But I did want it to be pretty heavy concentration of stuff that matters. It's basically a meme beginning to end. It's like 10,000 memes in a row.
Yeah, I think every freeze frame of the movie, if you just were going to
It's its own
screenshot
meme.
all of the thousands of frames in the film, you're like, there's a meme.
Right.
Oh, a
But
quote, there's a meme.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a meme war in a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we wanted the movie to be entertaining, like the
Yeah.
story to be interesting and stuff. We don't want it to
It
just
was.
sit there and be a lecture.
Very good.
And so that's the first test: is did people like it? And almost everybody says, yeah, that was enjoyable. Even the people who they don't know the philosophy and they're like, ooh, I'm gonna have to think about some stuff. But I'm glad I watched it. It was interesting. Because if it's not entertaining, then it isn't anything. Like, people switch it off and you accomplish nothing.
Exactly.
So to make a story that's has twists and turns in it and stuff, but has points to every single twist and turn. None of it's filler. None of it's just we have to use up some time here.
Beautifully cut. I thought.
Yes.
Yeah.
Question
And Andrew
for you.
loved it there.
Because you have done, the novel, and there is a lot of stuff that didn't come into the movie. And I mean, I think the movie's great. And I mean, I really didn't feel like I was sitting there for that long because I was just enthralled in, just everything going on in the film. But in the future, do you see making it into like maybe a mini series or a series that you could go on to maybe just open everybody's eyes, because everybody's going to be like, oh, well, this is the same story that's been on for years. But, it hasn't just happened to one culture. It's, it's happened to many over thousands of years, and
right. And the story
it keeps going.
The details change, but the underlying story of the controllers and their victims has sadly been repeated all over the world through all of human history. If we had had the time and the funding to begin with, we probably would have made a miniseries, because we easily have enough to fit in a miniseries. It's such its own thing now that I wouldn't even want to do a remake ourselves as a miniseries. I mean, maybe if there's a way to do a spin-off or something, I don't know. But I like the fact that it's this encapsulated, it's its own thing. You don't need to know anything beforehand to appreciate it. There doesn't have to be a sequel to it. It's this one weird thing that's unlike anything I've ever seen before.
One way in which it actually could work, but not everyone will know unless you actually know about this series, and it's an obscure series now, is the British series The Blackadder with Rowan Atkinson. That ran 4 seasons, and every era of the show is just acting out in a sitcom style, basically. The ridiculous, like, the characters are at different rungs of royal authority, medieval times, but then each generation, the main character is like the descendant of the character from the previous era, but the characters at the different rungs of authority are all like sort of, it's the same sitcom setup,
So
where
we could
they're all acting out the ridiculous things authority and this belief system sort of does,
Right,
but in a new era. And then at the end, the 4th season takes place in World War I era, when
Don't
the
spoil
1st
it.
season was like at I won't spoil anything, but was in like, basically like the 1400s or something when it first started. But so you could actually watch each season of The Blackadder independently, and it would be its
'cause
own
they take
amazing
place
thing
in
because it completely takes
So
place.
we
in
could
different
do an equivalent
So-
thing of different times in different places with different characters, but it's the same
Theoretically.
underlying thing going on
Right,
between the
okay.
controllers and people.
And then maybe just use the movie as flashbacks.
Yeah.
That way you incorporate, the movie in, because, I mean, the characters in it, they're just so rich. I mean, they just bring on this whole, human part,
Yeah.
that these actors brought to life. They brought these characters to life.
And that was really cool, because writing a script, it's text on a screen, and it was really cool to be able to write that and then see people making it real. And a lot of times I'd have to go back and like, did I write that? That was really cool. I wrote that. But like, they delivered it and made it so real and human.
You almost didn't believe you wrote it that good?
Yeah, that I was like, and that wasn't an attempt at bragging. It was like, what I wrote and imagined was not nearly as good as what they made it out of it,
Right.
and made it into, this believable character.
I
And
know
there's
what
so
you mean.
many characters in there that are, like I mentioned at the screening, we had never met before we were there to do the movie. The cast and crew had never met,
Amazing.
and we
That's so
shot
cool.
the whole thing 2.5 weeks.
Under
So
a huge
beautifully
amount of
acted.
physical stress. So first of all, they get there, and I wasn't there till the end because in the movie I'm an extra in a background scene in a carriage for a brief minute. So I was there at the end. And what's funny is Mississippi, you guys, is normally like 60 degrees or so at that time of year.
Mm-hmm.
Right as they get there, it's like snap 20. And they're on a set with no heat all day,
Doing
and
the
no one
exterior
came prepared.
shots.
So a bunch of these actors, some of them are from California, some of them are from other like warm climates. So they're like, I have like a light hoodie, and it's 20 in this church. So these actors are like throwing their coats on like offset and like trying to warm up and be like, ugh. And then it's like, all right, and scene, throw the coats off, and then they like run onto set,
into place,
shoot the
do the
scene,
scene.
try not to shiver because you're supposed to seem like you're in
Right.
summertime, and try not to let the camera see your breath or anything. Hurry up and then run back off set and like put
Cut.
your jackets
Mad
back on.
dash for the coast.
And then meanwhile, Larken, being the writer, he's written all this content, but writers always write more content, always, and the director's going to fit the movie. That's the nature of how writers think. So Larken's being tortured by having Andrew come back to him every night and be like, write that shorter lines, butcher that again. So Larken's going, okay, so Larken's staying up late writing rewrites, shivering his ass off in the morning, and then he's realizing as he's writing rewrites, okay, I'm going to also write rewrites at night while writing the novel, because I need to write the novel
Put it all
to make
back
sure
in.
that every time I butcher this chunk of lines, I remember everything I just lost, so I gotta put it over here in
Yeah.
the novel. So he's calling me from the set like, I'm so glad you're not here right now. It's just, it's so sad. I'm not feeling great. I know I'm getting sick, and I have a pretty tough immune system, and everybody's stressed. So, and then like I get there to do my shoot, and as soon as I land, it's like 60 degrees and sunny.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's good. And I'm like, oh, it's so nice here, and I get to shoot my scene for like a whole day, and it's not even that difficult. And then I'm like, done for me. Larken and Andrew are like.
Must be
Glad
nice.
you missed out. Glad you missed out, Amanda. We're really glad, actually.
Yeah.
You didn't want to be here for the rest of that.
Can I ask you a question about the haters for a second?
Okay.
What are you gonna do when they call this film the Alex Jones Plantation?
That'd be pretty funny. I'm sure people will find reasons to complain about it, and I don't care because none of them are going to be substantive. And like it, the only thing I care about is they'll make enough noise that some people might not watch it who would have. But if people watch it, that's all the rebuttal I need.
Well,
is people can watch it and see what it
Just
see
spell
what it
Park and
shows.
Rose wrong.
well, they can do that. I want them to
Right.
because
Spell it
nowadays,
right.
like, they're not nothing about the mainstream or the powers that shouldn't be are really powerful anymore. So nowadays, for our community and anyone that thinks like us, as long as they do it loudly enough and obnoxiously enough, any complaint that comes from them is directly an advertisement for us.
Yeah.
So a bunch of people are like, "Oh, they don't like this. What is it?" so like, I love it because for me, I'm like, at this point, it's advertising. Say all the crap you want. That's just gonna make like 500,000 people on TikTok or YouTube or wherever out there be like, I think we need to check out this movie. It might be a something.
I'm interested to see because a bunch of the mainstream movie critics are they're paid to pretend you like this, pretend you hate this. I would be really surprised if any of them dared to say they like this, but it's going to be interesting to see what they're going to say if they're going to try to bash it. I mean, they can say, well, there were little things because they didn't have that big a budget, so they could have, like, you can whine about little technical things. There weren't even
I think
much
Robert
of that.
Redford's going to love it. Robert Redford, Clint Eastwood, John Voight, these guys are going to be on board. Rob Schneider, Jim Brewer. I think you're going to have an army of people that say this movie is...
Yeah, and the thing is, you don't have to be a voluntarist to watch it and go, holy crap, there's some truth there. You don't have to be anything because, again, like I said at the screening, there's what the world is like now and there's what it should be like. And voluntarism is the description of what it should be like. The movie isn't about what it should be like. The movie is very much about what it shouldn't be like, but it is.
But you have to get people to acknowledge what is first before you can move on to discussing what should be. And when you have millions of people still like literally in a delusion because they're not really like here, and then you need to get them to hear where we are and go, "Do you see what's going on, everyone?" And then we have everyone on the same page.
So the ridiculousness of the circus. I mean, when the choices were Trump and Hillary Clinton, like really, the whole country, that's the best we can do. Those were our best two. Two complete psychos. And then, well, now we have Trump and Biden, two demented old, like, this
somehow,
is the best.
even though that was Hillary before, you managed to yet not even improve, even a tiny bit.
Well, it was-
wow, okay,
was it
so
was an
just
example
in a
of
different kind of evil.
What was that? Was it an example of America getting the choice between the same old thing or brick through the window, and they chose brick through the window?
Yeah, basically, I think Trump for them was basically a professional wrestling move. Like, nobody's paying attention.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. All our politicians are these bland, lukewarm nothings.
Nobody is listening to us.
We need to at least make people pay attention, whether it's to hate him or cheer for him. So they throw in this thing. He appointed all the same warmongers, all the same big bankers, all the same pro-establishment. Like, there was nothing anti-establishment about him except his words. But they had to do that to get people's attention because everybody was like, we're not even looking at you anymore. You put these jokers up and none of us. So they had to do something that would make a splash and make a controversy so people would pay attention to politics. But in the long run, and temporarily, it did that. It made a bunch of people watch. But it also made it into just a ridiculous spectacle. So now when people watch the movie, when people watch Jones Plantation, it isn't hard for them to recognize that, yeah, it's a stupid show and, like, it's just ridiculous because in real life it's gotten so ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I'm...
Perfect moment.
And I don't say this braggingly. if I was in charge of their propaganda and was a soulless evil bastard, I could do way better than they are. Like, I could put up a candidate that almost all the voters would go, yeah, he's our man. They can't even do, I could do that with like nothing. But they're so comfortable with what they've gotten away with for so long that now they put up two complete freaking jokers over and over again.
Exactly.
And most of the world's like, we're not even watching or we don't care. And at best, we're voting for this guy because we hate him. We don't even know who this guy is. I mean, Biden, did anybody care about Biden or even know? He just wasn't Trump.
Exactly.
It was literally, I'm voting against that guy. It's like, did you even look at what you just voted for? No, it wasn't him. And it was the same thing in the other direction. Well, Trump isn't that guy. So, yeah, but what is he?
So I've related, I want to get your thoughts on this statement. I've related the opinion, my opinion of this is that this is insanity, the elections we have. It's the literal definition of insanity.
Yeah.
We have people every 4 years doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that's a good way to describe it?
Yeah, and I think Jones Plantation totally makes fun of that in a way that everybody left and right, and everything in between chuckles at because they see the truth and yeah, it really is this ridiculous and this stupid. Because most people know that, including most people who still vote. Because they're still just picking, well, I think my slimy, corrupt sleazebag isn't quite as bad as your slimy, corrupt sleazebag. But does anybody even believe in it? And of course, the formerly mainstream media is still, or great democracy. I think more and more people are like, nothing is good about this. We're just barely trying to have the lesser of two evils and not even accomplishing that. And so I think right now is the time this movie should come out. Yeah. Because so many people are ready to admit, at least to themselves, I know this is all crap. This is all ridiculous. This isn't just, it's not quite the ideal. This is like fundamentally messed up. And with the movie, we just show them, it's actually even more fundamentally messed up than you thought.
It's funny because I think you talked earlier about, you asked us like what sort of influenced us or made us start to change. And I look back on my life, and there's the obvious conscious shift that I made, like just my ex asked me about the moon landing. But before that, I think there can be things in a child's life or even in their youth, like their upbringing, that they might not consciously know what they're watching. But whatever art they take in or whatever music they take in, it's something they really enjoy and identify with on some part, because part of them instinctively does understand that. And then later on, they'll understand what it meant when the rubber meets the road, and that little bit of art or that bit of culture or that bit of knowledge or that something sort of like primed them to be more likely to question, because it prepared them for what was to come. And like, I think that two movies that did that for me, because I saw them when I was very young and really understanding them, are The Matrix and V for Vendetta.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so
Yes,
I watched
two
both
great.
of them, and they really impacted me. But I remember being like, aware that they were impactful, and then aware that there was something I couldn't put my finger on as to why. Like, why do I like this so much? Like, why does this feel right? It's so weird and sci-fi, and I don't even feel like I fully understand what these adults are weirdly talking about in their weird leather costumes and philosophical conversations, but this is a really cool movie with action, and I want to keep watching it. So, it was, The Matrix was that one thing, or, V for Vendetta. Like, I was old enough to understand freedom at, like, age 18, but I didn't get what V for Vendetta was. It was like, what is this about? It just seems like, okay, we all need to come together to make sure we don't let people this completely tyrannical do this kind of stuff to us. And, at 18, it's like, oh, this world, the V for Vendetta world is like, oh, it's so creepy and dark and awful. And you think, our systems that we're in, our governments couldn't really be like this ever, could they? You're like, oh, okay. But it gives you such a chill that you're left with a, and so then you go out into your life, and then something in your real world reminds you of that feeling, and you're like, wait, this isn't good. I'm not supposed to feel this in America, where I was told I was free. So and I think there's a part of that people have been primed in some things in American culture that have been people trying to like shake the Americans loose, like we're trying to hint something at you. You need to think deeper on what's going on. And I feel like The Matrix was somebody trying to get people to think. And V for Vendetta and The Hunger Games were people trying to get the Americans to think in a gentle way.
And so in a culture that already had lots of movies about like tyrannical people trying to take over and these rebels trying to fight them, the one thing I hadn't seen, and like that I think makes Jones Plantation really stand out, is they don't really depict how tyranny actually happens in the real world. It's more the comic book, I'm evil. Like that's
And the good
not
guy
how.
wins.
Yeah,
The good guy wins.
and the good guy wins. But
Except
evil doesn't get into power by advertising itself as evil.
Exactly.
And you look at the most tyrannical regimes in history, and you see a bunch of good, happy, well-intentioned people cheering them into power, because that's how evil really does it. The actual evil people are the Mr. Smiths of the world. They're not the comic book villains who everybody goes, well, you're obviously evil. They're the people that people cheer for and vote for and go, I like his plan. He's going to give us free stuff, or he's going to do this, or he's going to do that. And to show how tyranny actually works in the real world and tricking people into cheering for evil instead of just, well, here's this evil guy and we have to fight him. Like, that's not how it works.
Exactly.
It works by, we have to fight the well-intentioned people who are dumb enough to not recognize that all the good stuff this person's offering you. And there's a point in the movie where there's one guy, won't give enough to be a spoiler, where he's like, this isn't what it looks like. This is bad going on. They're like, well, he's so nice to us and he's helping us in all these ways. And I want a bunch of people to sort of cringe at that and realize, ooh, that would have been me.
Yeah.
I would have been making excuses for my abuser because, well, he gave me free stimulus checks and he gave me, yeah, well, why did you
gave me
need that?
free
Because he
money.
ruined the world and and then gave me counterfeit money and then ruined the world again by doing that.
Well, it's almost as if, you know, definitely one thing I'd like to bring up about the movie, one scene that I actually really enjoyed, is you kind of through a homage to the typical, who you would call a conspiracy theorist today. The son who overheard, you know, them talking about the whole plans and how he was treated. I think really what that does is it makes people look at the people in their communities who have become awake and who have become aware, and start to look at them with a little bit more of a serious eye as opposed to just laughing it off. I'm curious as to know if you guys have ever experienced something like that yourself in your life while trying to tell someone the truth or trying to help a family member, I guess you can say, become more awake and aware.
Yeah, the biggest one for me is being put in a cage for a year by 12 people who I was trying to not have robbed in a jury trial for misdemeanor failure to file, which was many years ago. And
who were
so
the 12 people you were trying to not have robbed?
my jury of idiots, I don't remember their names.
Yeah.
They don't matter. They're puppets of the monstrosity. But they probably meant well, and they were convinced I was the bad guy, because not only was I trying to not get robbed, I was trying to have them not get robbed. And everybody knows there would be chaos and mayhem if they're not getting robbed by parasites. So there are parts of it that's hard for me to watch. And it's hard for me to read the novel version too, because of the familiarity of how, and this isn't, you know, I only had the way watered down version of nastiness here. Like, throughout most of history, you do that stuff and they torture you and chop you up and put your head on a bridge somewhere. Like, they just stuck me in a stupid waste of time prison for a year. So that's pretty damn easy compared to, like, most people who've resisted around the world over the centuries.
That's not nothing. I mean, you pass over that.
Yeah, it wasn't fun.
You say they threw me in a cage for a year, and I just, like, you pass over that so quickly. And for people who can't relate, I mean, like, you're the father of a very young little girl, and you have a young wife, and you're young, and now you suddenly can't at all get near and take care of your wife and daughter for 15 months.
Yeah, and the fact
That's
that
not cool, guys.
because of our system, 12 random people were the ones who decided that should happen. And they decided it because they had a liar up on the bench and a liar at the prosecutor's desk and several liars over there and several liars on their witness list and, you know, corruption all over the place. But at the end of the day, it's the illustration that the good people are the ones who enable evil because they don't want to think and they don't want to doubt. And that's why I want a lot of people to be guilt-tripped by Jones Plantation. When they're watching Samuel talking to the others, I want them to recognize, no, most of you wouldn't have been on the right side.
You were not
would
the
have been,
Samuel.
Yeah, you would have been mad at the guy saying something's really wrong here, because for you to consider that is uncomfortable, especially for you to consider the possibility that the people you elect and you hope are going to make things work, the people you put your trust in, are unthinkably evil. And if somebody comes along and say they aren't just a little bit corrupt,
bad.
they are freaking psychos. And it's so much easier for people who don't want to think about that to attack the one who said that and say, well, you probably deserved whatever happened to you, than it is to go, could that be true? So I want people, when they watch the movie, to think, if I was in that situation, would I have known any better? Would I have been on the wrong side, cheering for the bad guy unwittingly? Because, you know, nobody, these big throngs cheering for Hitler and Mao and Stalin and all them, they weren't going, yay, evil stuff.
Exactly.
None of them were. They were all going, yay, he's going to protect us from the bad things that are happening. That's how every single tyrant rises to power, by manipulating like righteous indignation and saying, if you give me power, I can right this wrong. And
I think one of the scariest things in some people's subconscious that they don't realize is there until they're made to question how reality is like they have this assumption that, I guess it's easy to see like how they could think that if you don't know how reality works, but once you